On the 6th of September 1892, Manchester City were known as Ardwick Association Football Club. Down the road in Liverpool, a baby is born to Mary and Charles Maxwell Woosnam. He is named after his father, known to all and sundry as Max. Charles Maxwell Woosnam, a man of the cloth, soon after Max's birth became the canon of the parish of Aberhafesp in mid Wales, and moved his family away from the hustle and bustle of city living. Young Max spent his formative years in rural Wales. However, as he was approaching his 8th birthday, he was sent as a boarder to Horace Hill School near Newbury. Fortunately for Max, his mother's family had money and were able to fund Max's education. Like his brother before him, he then continued his private education at Winchester College in 1905. His sporting prowess was clear for all to see. He was a talented footballer, cricketer and tennis player. In his final year at Winchester in 1911, Max played for the Public Schools 11 against the MCC at Lord's. With his team threatening to be bowled out for a meagre total, Woosnam entered the fray with a score at 65 for 5. He saved his side by making a century at the home of cricket, finishing the innings not out on 144. In the second innings, he again protected his wicket, making 33 not out, and the game finishing in an unlikely draw. Max Woosnam, Lord's Centurion. In the same year, Max progressed to university and became a student at Trinity College, Cambridge. His sporting talents made him a Cambridge Blue in 5 different sports, those being football, cricket, tennis, real tennis and golf. He played golf to a scratch handicap, and it is said that the obstacles that were hazardous for other players he would clear with the power and accuracy of his shots. Max Woosnam, scratch golfer. Max's footballing talent did not go unnoticed at Cambridge, and in 1913 he was selected for and went on a tour of Brazil with the famous and completely amateur side Corinthians FC. They played a total of 6 games, winning 4, drawing 1 and losing 1. Max scored in 3 of those games from his defensive position. Woosnam was a committed amateur player throughout his time in football. He is said to have found it vulgar to be paid. Although it should be noted that professional footballers were not paid a handsome wage like their peers of today. He captained the Cambridge University football team in 1914, playing at centre half. The Times newspaper describing him in one report as Captain Courageous. Throughout his football career, he was a strong, combative defender who never ducked a challenge. He was described as being strong in attack and defence. He was always in the thick of the fray. At a time when challenges were brutal and unpunished, Max stood out, a hard man in an uncompromising sport. At the back end of the 1913-14 season, Max played 3 times for Chelsea Football Club, playing at centre half. They won all 3 games without conceding, beating his future team Manchester City 1-0 along the way. In 1914, Max was again selected to tour Brazil with Corinthians Football Club. Whilst aboard the ship on their way to Rio, World War I broke out, the ship having to be rerouted to dodge a German gunship along the way. On arriving in Rio, they left the ship, went on a walk to a football stadium and then returned to the ship for their return home. Woosnam immediately enlisted with Montgomeryshire Yeomanry upon his return, and he began his training in Suffolk. Here he met Edith Johnson. They soon became engaged to wed as Max awaited his first posting as a soldier. In 1915, Woosnam was posted to Gallipoli to join the fighting. It is estimated that casualties numbered 250,000 on each side. This disastrous campaign ended in the Allies retreating. Max was transferred to Egypt, joining the Western Frontier Force. On home leave in 1917, Max married Edith, and after a short honeymoon, he returned to Egypt, fighting in Gaza and Jerusalem. In 1918, all British troops were replaced in Palestine by Indian troops when the Great German Offensive began in France. Max arrived in the trenches in October 1918 and served his country alongside the famous war poet Siegfried Sassoon. In November, the Great War ended and Max returned to Cambridge University to finish his education. Woosnam left Cambridge for the final time in 1919. Before finding a job, he played for the first time at the Wimbledon Tennis Championships. His first visit resulted in a second round defeat in the singles, out in the first round of the men's doubles, and made it as far as the third round in the mixed. Max moved later in 1919 to Manchester for the purpose of work, gaining employment at the engineering firm Crosley Brothers. Well known for his footballing abilities, he was sought after by both Manchester football clubs. He asked the legend of Manchester football, Billy Meredith, where he should choose, and naturally Billy advised him to sign for City. Due to work commitments and being an amateur, he decided he could only play in home games. Despite the City fans wanting to see their new signing, Woosnam asked to play in the reserves until he believed he was match fit. Max finally made his home debut on January 1st, 1920 in a 1-0 win against Bradford City. At the end of that month, City travelled to Leicester for an FA Cup tie. Woosnam withdrew because of work commitments and City went on to lose 3-0. The fans were not happy that Max hadn't played, and rumours circulated that his employers had refused to allow him the time off and they were made the scapegoats for the loss. This was not the truth. Max had made the decision as he believed his obligation first and foremost was to his job. A group of colleagues and employees of the firm sent a message to the board of directors saying that if Woosnam was not allowed to play for City, then they would go on strike. Crosley Brothers took the threat seriously and informed Max that he was obliged to play for City before work commitments. He only missed 3 games for the rest of that season and City finished in 7th position. At the end of the season, Max was chosen to play football and tennis for Great Britain at the 1920 Antwerp Summer Olympic Games. Due to the punishing schedule, Max decided he could only commit to one sport and chose to play tennis. Woosnam made it to the men's and mixed doubles finals, winning the gold in the men's and silver in the mixed. Both games were played on the same day. Max Woosnam, Olympic gold medalist. Before the 1920-21 season, Max decided to retire from football so he could concentrate on and further his tennis career. However, as a precaution, he re-signed for City. He was concerned about getting injured playing football and also the amount of time he would have to take off work. His employers reassured Max that his sporting activities should take priority. Max reversed his decision and only missed 8 games that season for City. He was a team star performer and crowd favourite. City captain Eli Fletcher and other players approached manager Ernest Mangnall and requested that Woosnam should be made captain. Since his early years, one of Max's strengths was his ability to get on with people. He was an extremely popular man. City won 11 of the final 16 games of the season, with Woosnam as captain, finishing the season in 2nd in the First Division behind Burnley. The amateur footballer in a team of professionals made captain at the insistence of his peers, a team that consisted of other legends such as Tommy Johnson, Horace Barnes, Tommy Browell and Sam Cookson. Woosnam was only in his 2nd season at City. Max Woosnam, Manchester City captain. In the summer of 1921, Max returned to playing tennis. He represented Great Britain against Spain in the Davis Cup, which they won. They were to travel to America to play the Australians after their victory, but in between, Max played at the Wimbledon Tennis Championships, where, with Randolph Lysette, won the men's doubles title with a straight sets win, and for good measure came runner-up in the mixed doubles. Max was named captain of the Davis Cup trip to America to play Australia for a chance to challenge the Davis Cup holders, the USA. Unfortunately, they lost. Max Woosnam, Wimbledon champion and Davis Cup captain. Whilst in America, tennis enthusiast and legendary Hollywood movie star Charlie Chaplin invited the Great Britain Davis Cup team to his California mansion for a game. Max took no pity on Chaplin and thrashed him on the court. Chaplin challenged him then to a game of table tennis, and ever the showman, Max replaced his bat with a butter knife and then proceeded to thrash Chaplin once again. Whilst Chaplin was holding court talking to the tennis stars, Woosnam picked up and dunked him into the swimming pool, much to the amusement of his colleagues. However, Chaplin took umbrage and stormed indoors, refusing to come out until Max and the rest of the Davis Cup players had left the premises. On returning to the UK, Max headed straight back to training with City and was playing within a week in the centre of defence. Joining Woosnam on the pitch was the returning Billy Meredith as player coach. In November he scored his first goal for the club against West Bromwich Albion. A poem was written about it, and keeper Tom Blair was so excited he threw his gloves into the goal and charged upfield to join in the celebrations. This was the time of a quick handshake and getting on with the game, but such was Woosnam's popularity, his teammates could not contain their excitement. City finished 10th, Max scored 3 goals. Woosnam was selected to play for England against Wales on March the 13th, 1922. He captained the side to a 1-0 win. He had previously captained England's amateur side too. Max Woosnam, England captain. However, in City's last home game of the season against Newcastle United, he went into a challenge with Jimmy Lowe. This broke Max's leg. Max stated afterwards that it was entirely his own fault. One City diarist wrote, "I made my usual trip to the players' entrance for autographs and stood amongst a silent crowd of sympathisers as Max, still smiling cheerfully, was carried to the ambulance on a stretcher. A small boy detached himself from the onlookers and calmly asked the injured player to sign his book. Before any of the amazed spectators could shoo the boy away, Max asked the stretcher bearers to stop for a moment so he could sign his book." Due to the injury, Max couldn't play tennis in the summer or the football the following winter. During this time, he was headhunted by ICI and left Crossley Brothers. In the summer of 1923, he played tennis once more. He played at Wimbledon, but due to his injury, he struggled to find a top-class doubles partner and did not make the same impact as the last time he competed there in 1921. Having missed the entire 1922-23 season, Max trained hard to lead City out once more. But no more at Hyde Road Stadium. City would be playing this season at their new home, the 85,000 capacity Main Road. City, captained by Woosnam, beat Sheffield United 2-1 in front of excess of 60,000 fans. After the game, he realised that the break to his leg had caused him to be too slow for top-class tennis and too frail for top-class football. He spoke with the manager, Ernest Magnall, and told him he was to retire. However, Max did make the odd appearance for City until he finally hung up his boots in 1925. Maxwell Woosnam played 96 times for Manchester City and scored 4 goals. The City captain was the fans' favourite and was recognised further in 1977 when a new estate was built in Moss Side. Manchester City Council decided to name the streets after 11 past heroes of City, one of those being Max Woosnam Way. In later years, City manager Ernest Magnall wrote in the Empire News, "Now and again one hears wild and irresponsible talk of professional footballers not liking the idea of amateurs playing on their side. Well, I can truthfully say during my career in the game, I have never known a situation where the professionals have taken exception to any amateur player who was worthy of taking his place side by side with them. If proof of this is needed, it is contained in the story I'm going to tell you, which testifies to the respect the professionals playing with Max Woosnam had for him. When he settled down as a regular player in our first team, Eli Fletcher, who was the captain, came along with other players to interview me. The request put forward by Eli on behalf of himself and his fellow players was that they would like the management to grant their desire that Max should be elected captain. I told them if that was their unanimous wish, we had better approach Max and see what he thought of the proposition. We did approach the famous amateur, and he was so impressed by the sincerity and unselfishness of the players, their manifestation of esteem and their compliment, that he accepted their tribute. The directors having fallen in with the suggestion, Max became captain. There was never any regrets over the changing captaincy for Eli and those who served under him, or for the management of the club. In his working life, he was promoted to the board of directors of ICI. He continued to play tennis sociably, and he also played snooker, where it is recorded he scored a maximum 147 break. Perhaps his greatest triumph came in October 1929, when he placed second in the Wirral and District Cage Bird annual show with his budgerigar. Max Woosnam, snooker maximum break maker. Max Woosnam was a wonderfully gifted man. Modest but determined, whatever he turned his hand to, he seemed to be successful. However, on July the 14th, 1965, Max died of respiratory disease. He had been a smoker most of his life. He was 72 years old. Max, a survivor of the Great War, a century maker at Lord's, a scratch golfer, a 5-time Cambridge Blue, a Wimbledon tennis champion, an Olympic gold medalist, a Davis Cup captain, a 147 maker in snooker, a captain of the England football team, and legend, captain and hero of Manchester City. I have mainly used Mick Collins's book All Round Genius for my research. The words of the diarist, Ernest Bagnell's piece in the Empire News, and the poem at the end of this video are all from Mick's book. If you want to know more about the remarkable Max Woosnam, then there is no better source. Thanks for listening, and please subscribe to Man City Fan TV. All the best, Blues. What a scene of jubilation and a round of great applause. The spectators are delighted, and you need not ask the cause. For Max Woosnam of the City, who at Cambridge won his blue, has at last performed the function with the goal he had in view. The Albion were opponents at Hyde Road, the favoured patch, where City since 1919 have never lost a match. This game they won by 6-1, but City's number 5 was Max's special effort, and its memory will survive. Max had obtained the precious goal we'd waited for so long, and wholehearted acclamation was his greeting from the throng. 'Twas a tribute to a genius who had won the hearts of all by his splendid sporting spirit and his mastery of the ball. He's an absolute first-rater, and one really wonders how those who pick the internationals have missed him up till now. This all-round athlete, amateur, has earned a lasting fame. He's popular with everyone. He always plays the game.